in our headlines on this Friday afternoon, August 5th. South Korea's Danuri took off into space 6 hours ago aboard SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket from Florida. The launch marks the first step in the country's lunar mission. U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is now in Japan, the final leg of her Asia tour, which follows a visit to South Korea. Here, Pelosi called for efforts to advance the bilateral alliance. South Korea's current account logged a surplus in June of over $5.6 billion for the second straight month. The surplus, however, is smaller compared to June last year. South Korea's Danuri took off into space at 8:08 on this Friday morning, that is Korea local time. It was launched by SpaceX in Florida and marks the country's first tangible step to joining the exclusive global lunar mission. Our Shin Ha-young starts us off.
The long journey of South Korea's first lunar orbiter has begun. The Korea Pathfinder lunar orbiter Danuri was sent on its way to the moon from Florida's Cape Canaveral Space Force Station at 8:08 Friday morning Korean time. According to the Ministry of Science and ICT, the launch is proceeding successfully. 40 minutes after the launch, the 678-kilogram Danuri successfully separated from its SpaceX Falcon 9 carrier rocket. The first communication to an antenna located in Canberra, Australia, was also successful. It will take around 4.5 months of Danuri to enter orbit around the moon, which is scheduled to begin on December 16th. After starting the circle above the moon's surface in late December, it will carry out its mission from early next year until around December 2023. Danuri is carrying 6 scientific instruments, including an ultra-sensitive camera. During its mission, it will measure a variety of traits of the lunar surface, as well as the terrain and magnetic strength to create the world's first polarization map of the entire moon. In addition, Danuri will look for the best landing site for NASA's Artemis program and will test the world's first deep space internet communication. In doing so, it will try to send back to Earth the music video for the BTS song Dynamite. If Danuri successfully enters the moon's orbit, South Korea will become the 7th country to have orbited the moon. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Now, as my colleague Ha-young said, Danuri is scheduled to arrive at its destination in mid-December. The extended travel time comes as it uses the gravity of the sun and Earth to travel to the moon to save fuel. Our Kim Jung-sil has more.
Normally, it takes as little as 3 days to get to the moon, but Danuri is looking at a journey of about 4.5 months. Why? It's because the orbiter will use a more energy-efficient method of travel.
The trajectory used for the Danuri, called as the Ballistic Lunar Transfer, BLT, is an energy-efficient one.
This BLT method is the key to Danuri's successful lunar mission. And it's so difficult that no other countries apart from the US and Japan have attempted it. The route will take Danuri first some 1.56 million kilometers in the direction of the sun before it loops back around the Earth to enter a trajectory toward the moon around December 16th. This way, Danuri can make fuel savings of 20 to 25%, a precious amount in the depths of space. Scientists at the Korea Aerospace Research Institute originally designed Danuri to make 3.5 rotations of the Earth for a shorter trip. But as Danuri was being built, it became much heavier than planned. If Danuri had reached the moon with no fuel, it wouldn't have been able to conduct any of its mission. So officials chose to use gravity to propel the orbiter instead. On its journey, Danuri will draw a giant ribbon-like figure and fly about 6 million kilometers. That's about 15 times the distance between the moon and Earth, which is about 380,000 kilometers. Danuri will begin to slow down from December 16th before entering its target orbit 100 kilometers above the moon's surface. Authorities expect that at least 9 trajectory adjustments will need to be made before its mission begins. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
And authorities here have just confirmed officially, that is, the success of the Danuri mission. Well, that is the launch. Now, up next, we turn to a scholar in the field for her thoughts on South Korea's first step, that is, to its lunar expedition. I have Dr. Michelle Hanlon at the Center for Air and Space Law at the University of Mississippi joining us live on the line. Dr. Hanlon, it's a pleasure to have you back.
Thank you so much for having me back. It's a pleasure to be here, especially on such an auspicious day.
Thank you so much for your kind words. Dr. Hanlon, let's begin with a few words on the significance of South Korea's first mission to the moon.
This is an incredible achievement. As the reporter noted, South Korea will only be the 7th nation to actually orbit the moon. You know, it joins China, Japan, the EU, India, Russia, and the United States in that feat. Of course, we did have also an Israeli mission that crash landed on the moon, but that is not going to happen in this case. Coupled with the recent successful launch of Nuri, South Korea continues to prove that it has homegrown talent to harness the resources of space to build its economy and better the lives of South Koreans and of all humanity. I think just listening to your reporter explain the trajectories and the physics, you know, I'm just a lawyer, but I think the understanding and being able to figure out the algorithms and all of the propulsion and the fuel and the angles and create such a complex mission is just such an incredible achievement, and I applaud South Korea and the Korean Space Agency.
Right, again, I thank you for your kind words. Dr. Hanlon, the unmanned spacecraft was launched about 6 hours ago from Florida and will begin to orbit the moon, as my colleagues Hayoung and Chong have said, in December. Could you perhaps tell us a little bit more about South Korea's planned probe?
Absolutely. So it is going to take about 4 months to get there, and the reason, of course, was explained beautifully because we're going to save that propulsion so we can actually spend an entire year circling the moon. It's carrying 6 payloads, and this is really exciting too because 5 of those payloads were actually created and developed by Korean universities and researchers. So not only do you have indigenous talent building the satellite, the bus to get you there, all of these instruments are also being created within South Korea. So you have, I wrote them down, a lunar terrain imager, a wide-angle polarimetric camera, a magnetometer, a gamma-ray spectrometer, a disruption-tolerant network experimental payload, and the last payload was developed by NASA, and it's a highly sensitive camera called ShadowCam. So again, you know, this is the incredible faith that that people have, that NASA has in South Korea technology to include this very, very sensitive, brand new, highly precise camera on the South Korean bus. With these instruments, what's really exciting is that you're going to be able to explore the terrain much more closely than we ever have before. The pictures are going to be very clear. We're going to be looking for water, which is important to sustain life when we build communities on the moon, and also to act as propulsion for when we use the moon to go beyond the moon to explore further into deep space. And we're going to be looking for helium-3, which we believe is highly prevalent all around the moon, and which we think we can use to harness to use as fuel and bring it back down to Earth to do that. Of course, we also are testing an internet system, wireless internet, and I love that the first thing that they're going to broadcast is BTS's Dynamite song and that one line, "'Cause I am in the stars tonight." How fitting. And finally, that ShadowCam is going to do a first. It's going to be able to take pictures in these very dark, very cold craters in the permanently shadowed areas of the moon where we think there's a lot of water. So with all of these kind of technical measurements, with understanding this mapping, we're going to be able to find where these resources that we need are, and we're going to be able to figure out where the best place to land to actually reach them is going to be.
Right, and speaking about landing, Professor Dr. Hanlon, South Korea hopes to achieve a robotic landing on the moon within the next decade, and of course an asteroid sample return mission as well. What are the broader implications, perhaps, of these upcoming missions?
They're incredible. So again, this is indigenous technology. This is South Korea developing this all on its own. It's a bright, shining example that space is not just for big superpowers, right? Space is for everyone. And when nations like South Korea are able to develop these space capabilities, they're acting like a superpower. We're going to turn this geopolitics on its head. Being able to access the resources of space in an equal way, on an equal basis, is really going to change the calculus and the dynamic of how we relate to each other here on Earth. It's going to really upend our interpretation of political power and economic power. I mean, we can't understate how important this is to be able to see smaller countries like South Korea, put their minds to becoming a space power and harnessing that space economy and harnessing all of the resources of space to better not just itself and South Korea and South Korean people, but all of humanity. And that is really the second really important takeaway is Korea is stepping up to the table and contributing to humanity's future. It's helping all of humanity to help us understand ourselves and help us in our quest to explore the cosmos and harness, again, all of the resources that we don't even know exactly what's out there yet that will benefit all of humanity.
Right. Dr. Helen, do you believe that interest in space exploration has been perhaps rising in recent times? And if that is the case, how do you explain it?
So it is absolutely the case. More and more people are getting interested. It's because we're understanding that our resources on Earth are limited. We have explored all of the territory on Earth. Perhaps there are some metals and elements we can use and mine from our deep seas, but we know that's finite. We have to look elsewhere. And this isn't abandoning Earth. This is going out beyond our borders to find things that will help us and benefit us here on Earth. I like to think about Earth. People think about Earth and say, Earth is here and space is out there. But you know what? Space isn't out there, even though we call it outer space. We live in space. So it's really by going into space and understanding what's around us and beginning to discover what's around us, we're really almost looking in our own backyard, something that humanity has been thinking about for centuries, right? We have always looked to the stars, and now we finally have the capability to do it. And so that being able to discover what's in our own backyard is so important, and it's such a pull. But the other thing that is really amazing about space is just that endless possibility. We have no idea what we're going to find there. We might find, things like cures for things like COVID, or we might find elements that we've never heard of before, that we've never encountered before, that will answer all of our fuel problems. I'm not suggesting that all our answers are in space, but space can definitely act, again, as an equalizer. It can change our geopolitical properties down here, and it can provide benefits that we can't even think about or know about at this point in time.
Right, and against that backdrop, Dr. Helen, perhaps we could end with a few words from you to relevant authorities here in South Korea as they seek to, pave a greater path to space.
Well, I'd say keep up the good work. You guys have been amazing this year alone. But I will say, the key to successful and sustainable space exploration is responsibility and cooperation. So I really encourage South Korea and the Korean Space Agency to continue to do what they're already doing, and that's to uphold the measures established by the United Nations to support the long-term sustainability of space activities. And also collaboration. The information that we receive from this mission, Danuri, is going to contribute its knowledge to the Artemis program and contribute to the U.S. Mission of putting the next human and the first woman on the moon. And so that collaboration is so, so important. And we really have to understand that we as humans will only succeed in space if we are able to rely upon each other. So again, keep up the good work, and I really look forward to see the pictures that you guys return.
All right, Dr. Helen, as always, thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you for your time as well.
Thank you so much.
Right, in other news, the U.S. House Speaker, that is, Nancy Pelosi, is currently in neighboring Japan, having ended her agenda here in South Korea, where she highlighted the solid alliance shared by Seoul and Washington. Our Foreign Ministry correspondent Min Soo-kyun has more on her remarks.
U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says her visit to South Korea reaffirmed the strength of the Seoul-Washington alliance. In a statement released on Thursday, Pelosi stressed that the two countries share a strong bond formed for security and forged by decades of warm friendship. She added that the two-day visit to Seoul reaffirmed their treasured ties and their shared commitment to advancing security and stability. Talking about her phone call with President Yoon Suk-yeol, Pelosi said the delegation was pleased to have the phone meeting, adding that each member of the congressional delegation spoke with President Yoon to highlight areas of continued cooperation for a free and open Indo-Pacific. Regarding her talks with National Assembly Speaker Kim Jin-pyo, Pelosi said the two sides reiterated their commitment to strengthening security and supply chains and boosting trade and investment. While not mentioned in Thursday's statement, Kim and Pelosi also discussed issues related to North Korea, agreeing to support efforts for denuclearization. During her stay, Pelosi also visited the demilitarized zone on the inter-Korean border and praised the U.S. and South Korean troops for their patriotic and devoted service on the Korean peninsula. It's the first time in 20 years for a U.S. House Speaker to visit Seoul. Pelosi is now in Japan for the final stop of her Asia trip this week. Min Suk-hyun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, in Cambodia, ASEAN-related foreign ministers' meetings continue in the capital city of Phnom Penh. At the East Asia Summit earlier on this Friday, Foreign Minister Pak Jin touched upon a host of regional concerns, including North Korea's nuclear pursuits and Myanmar's state of emergency. Also this afternoon, ministers are attending the ASEAN Regional Forum to address security and stability. Now, North Korea's top envoy to Indonesia, Wang Yi, is representing his country to this forum. Meanwhile, South Korea's top diplomat Park may meet with his U.S. counterpart to advance talks on joint security efforts. And Foreign Minister Pak Jin has been invited to talks in the Chinese city of Tsingtao next week by his Chinese counterpart, that is Wang Yi. Now, according to Seoul's foreign ministry on Friday, the two diplomats will discuss matters of mutual interest ranging from bilateral ties, North Korea-related issues, as well as those related to the broader region. Park's three-day trip to China will begin next Monday, and he is also scheduled to host virtual talks with the Korean business community there. Pak Jin and Wang Yi's meeting comes ahead of the two countries' 30th anniversary of diplomatic ties on August 24th. And that ends part one of the Daily Report. We return with part two in a few minutes. Stay with us.
Arirang, what matters?
On Viewpoint today, we turn to an issue in neighbouring Japan that has been receiving quite a bit of regional attention. Relevant authorities last month formally approved a detailed wastewater discharge blueprint for the damaged Fukushima nuclear power plant by the Tokyo Electric Power Company Holdings. Accordingly, this week, construction has begun in preparation for next year's wastewater release, despite strong opposition from the local fishing community there. Now, for more on the situation, I have Sean Burney at Greenpeace East Asia live on the line. Welcome to the programme, Sean.
Hello.
Right, Sean, I understand the wastewater will first be filtered to get rid of some 60 isotopes, with the exception of tritium, which reportedly cannot be eliminated using existing technology. First then, what are the potential risks of tritium to marine life and, of course, to us?
Well, unfortunately, there's going to be other radioactive materials in addition to tritium. But in terms of tritium itself, there's many questions about the long-term effects of tritium exposure. One of the characters of this radionuclide that they'll be discharging in vast amounts is that it actually binds with organic material and therefore has the potential to affect the DNA structure of all living things. So the problem is the Japanese government doesn't take the science of radioactive tritium seriously, and therefore basically says it's okay to discharge. But actually, there's a serious problem with radioactive tritium, as there is with all radioactivity when it's released into the environment.
Right, and despite the concern you've just raised, it has been reported that this rather drastic, debatable measure, of course, was adopted by Japan as the only practical way out of a daunting dilemma with regard to storage of accumulating wastewater from the damaged Fukushima nuclear power plant. Do you agree, Sean? I mean, is there another feasible option with regard to better addressing the wastewater dilemma?
Well, unfortunately, the decision to release the water is more about communicating to the Japanese people and internationally that the Japanese government has the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant under control and that decommissioning of the disastrous site is moving forward. The reality is there is sufficient storage capacity both on the site and in the immediate area next to the plant for long-term storage of this water. The alternatives to discharge, in particular storage and processing and applying the best available technology, has largely been ignored by the Japanese government, largely because of economics. They don't want to spend the money to reduce the environmental impact of the Fukushima disaster. And therefore, discharging radioactive pollution into the sea has been chosen as the cheapest option.
Right. And the IAEA, for its part, Sean, says the upcoming discharge meets international standards and, quote, will not cause any harm to the environment. I'm assuming you disagree.
Well, the science on this is very clear. If you discharge radioactivity into the environment, there will be an effect. That's just the basic principles of radioactivity and what it does to the environment, human health. The International Atomic Energy Agency is a body whose job is to promote nuclear power. Since 2015, the IAEA has advocated direct discharge of the water into the Pacific Ocean. We've gone through the documentation from the Japanese government, from Tokyo Electric and the IAEA, and there are so many gaps in their basic scientific explanation for what they're actually doing. So no, we have no faith, I'm afraid, in the IAEA's approach. It's being used as a cover to defend the Japanese government's decision, which we believe is unlawful.
Sean, the fishing industry around Japan's Fukushima coast has shared its disapproval with regard to this latest decision by relevant authorities there. What do you suppose will be the broader implications of Japan's release of Fukushima wastewater on the region's seafood industry?
Well, of course, the fishing communities in Fukushima have been devastated by the earthquake, the tsunami, and the triple reactor meltdown in 2011. The fishing communities globally are under so many threats because of climate change, because of overfishing, and now they're faced with radioactive discharge, a deliberate decision by the Japanese government. So we hope that the fishing communities can actually be supported by taking action to actually stop this discharge. We already know that the likely planned discharge will be delayed. We believe that there's further action that can be taken both domestically in Japan and internationally. In terms of the impacts, the problem is these discharges will go on not for a few years, not even for a few decades, but potentially indefinitely, because the amount of contaminated water is continuing to rise in Fukushima. So there really is an opportunity to stop this before it actually begins. And at that point, we would basically be protecting the fishing communities from radioactive contamination.
And that being said, Sean, is there any action that neighboring countries, including South Korea, of course, could perhaps take amid neighboring Japan's wastewater plans?
Well, I think one of the most important signals is coming from small island nations in the Pacific. They've appointed a science panel. These are international experts that are looking at the issues. At least from the communications so far, they're not impressed by either the Japanese government or the IAEA. And the possibility of legal action is being considered. That's under the UN Convention for the Law of the Sea. So the idea that small nations in the Pacific are taking on Japan, an enormous economic and political power, that should be a signal to all countries in the Asia-Pacific region that they should be doing everything they can to protect the environment and protect the health and well-being of their people.
I see. All right. Sean Banney at Greenpeace East Asia, thank you so much for making the time to join us live at this very early hour at your end with your thoughts.
Thank you.
Findings for the month of June show South Korea's current account in the black for the second straight month, but there has been a slight decline in the size of that surplus as compared to June last year. Our Finance Ministry correspondent Ji reports.
South Korea logged a current account surplus in June for the second straight month. Preliminary data released by the Bank of Korea on Friday showed that the balance of trade in June came to a surplus of $5.61 billion. But the surplus was smaller than it was a year earlier. A Bank of Korea official says that because growth in exports was offset by increased imports on the back of the higher cost of fuel and commodities.
The goods account surplus has decreased from $7.5 billion in June last year to $3.6 billion this year as continued growth in imports surpassed that of exports.
Growth of goods exports was led by petroleum products with a more than 9% rise compared to the previous year, recording an on-year increase for 20 months in a row. But the bank said due to the slowdown of exports to the country's biggest trading partner, China, it plunged from the nearly 40% growth recorded in the same period a year earlier. The Bank of Korea also attributed the on-year decrease of the current account surplus to the 19% rise in imports of goods. Amid the global supply chain bottleneck and the war in Ukraine, raw material imports rose nearly 29%, with coal skyrocketing almost 190% and crude oil up more than 53%. The official said exports are likely to remain solid, but fears of recession in major countries and volatility in global raw material prices are key risks to South Korea's overseas sales. Ji, Arirang News.
The ruling People Power Party and the government are exploring ways to ease corporate red tape to facilitate business ventures that look to revitalize the local economy. During talks earlier on this Friday, the two sides also agreed on the need to remove regulations that heavily punish corporations for minor violations and instead to opt for fines or other administrative restrictions. Also, environment-related regulations will be revised to boost employment opportunities, but any final decision on the matter will be made following in-depth public debate to ensure safety. In the UK, the central bank there has delivered its highest interest rate hike in almost 3 decades. The rate has been raised by 50 basis points as bank officials warn recession will take root in the UK late this year. Our Isingja has more.
The Bank of England's rate setters on Thursday voted 8-1 to raise its key interest rate by 50 basis points to 1.75%. The big step was the biggest single hike in 27 years.
Returning inflation to the 2% target remains our absolute priority. There are no ifs or buts about that. At this meeting, the committee voted to increase bank rate by 0.5 percentage points to 1.75%.
The rate hike comes as the UK is facing historic high inflation, on track to top 13%. And Thursday's decision came despite warnings of a recession looming in the country, with the central bank previously saying that Britain would enter a recession at the end of 2022 and not emerge until early 2024. It added that the country was facing its biggest slump in living standards since records began in the 1960s. The International Monetary Fund has even predicted Britain will have the slowest growth and the highest inflation in 2023 among the world's major developed economies. But will there be another major hike?
Looking ahead, that does not mean we're now moving to a predetermined path of raising bank rate by 50 basis points per meeting, or indeed any other number for that matter. Policy is not on a preset path. All options are on the table for our September meeting and beyond that.
Fitch Ratings predicts another 50 basis point hike in the Bank of England's next policy meeting, while analysts at Citi predict 2 25 basis point hikes for the rest of the year. The UK central bank has raised interest rates 6 times since December, where more hikes could be on the way, despite a gloomy growth forecast and worries of skyrocketing borrowing costs for homeowners. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, in Egypt, South Korea's Black Eagles has become the first foreign team to put on display a spectacular air show above the pyramids. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Pei Eun-ji has some of those scenes and more on their significance. Do take a look.
South Korean fighter planes fly over the ancient pyramids in Egypt, leaving smoke trails of different colors. They also loop and spin across the sky to create the shape of the Korean flag, and then the shape of a heart. The Black Eagles, an air display team from the South Korean Air Force, took part in an air show in Egypt for the first time. They flew for about 30 minutes and pulled off around 24 different air maneuvers. This made them the first ever air demonstration team from another country to fly above the Pyramids of Giza. The Pyramids Air Show is usually only for teams from the Egyptian Air Force because access to the airspace above the 4,500-year-old pyramids for other countries' militaries is not easily permitted. The Black Eagles also conducted a joint flight with the Egyptian Air Force Air Demonstration Team, the Silver Stars, to foster a partnership between the two nations.
It was great to see the two countries cooperate and perform at this air show.
The cooperation and Korea's participation in the Pyramids Air Show is part of the country's efforts to export F-A-50 light attack fighters to Egypt. The Black Eagles were using the T-50 supersonic trainer jets, and the F-A-50 is the light combat version.
I heard Egypt is very much interested in our F-A-50 jets to acquire them as their advanced trainer jets. All the local military officers are watching us perform, so if they see how well our aircraft can perform, I think they will definitely be fascinated by our T-50 series planes.
Earlier in February, Egypt signed a deal worth almost $1.7 billion with South Korea to purchase K-9 self-propelled howitzers and other support vehicles. The two countries are reportedly negotiating whether to sign another deal for the F-A-50s and ways to manufacture them in Egypt. Pei Eun-ji, Arirang News.
Auditions to find new talent for the K-pop industry are quite common, but our Song Yoo-jin went to one competition that touts a slight twist. Do take a listen.
In South Korea, a concours, which is French for contest, usually refers to a classical music competition. But the Gyeongyang Applied Music Concours is different. It's Korea's one and only applied music concours, a competition for modern popular music. Hosted by the Gyeongyang Shinmun newspaper, it aims to discover the next big thing in K-pop by giving artists a stage to showcase their talent. Around 11,000 contestants have taken part in it since 2007. But with numerous K-pop auditions already existing in the country, what's so unique about this one?
While most auditions focus on whether artists have popular appeal and go well with the latest trends, we prioritize participants' potential to grow as professional artists and their passion towards music.
Contestants can receive fair and objective evaluation as we have a talented pool of judges consisting of professors of applied music and K-pop musicians.
Popular Korean singer Seok-Yi, singer and musical actress Son Seung-yeon, and guitarist Kim Jin-san all started their musical careers through this contest. And to dig out more hidden talent, this year's finals took place on Tuesday. 45 out of 600 participants were selected to compete in either vocals or composition. The competition is nerve-wracking, but contestants say the experience will help them realize their dreams.
I got so nervous and made so many mistakes. I'm a little bummed out because this was not my best performance, but it also made me think that I should practice harder.
I decided to sign up because I want my voice to be heard by as many people as possible. I think this marks my first step in becoming a singer.
As well as prize money, the winners are also given the chance to perform in a special concert.
Performing on stage as much as you can is very helpful for prospective musicians. So every year we organise a special live concert where award winners get a chance to perform.
The concert will take place later this month after 2 weeks of professional training. 송유진, Arirang News.
And also here in the capital city, the Hangang Summer Fiesta is in full swing, and my colleague Kim Yeon-seung was recently at one of the river parks to bring us the sights and sounds from this year's event.
The Hangang River flows through the heart of Seoul City. And it's the place to be this summer thanks to Hangang River Festival. One of the most exciting events is a king canoe tour.
Thanks to Hangang River Festival, people now have the chance to glide on top of the biggest body of water in Seoul on a canoe, just like I'm doing right now.
I'm excited and nervous. I think it'll be a little hard, but I think it'll be fun and great.
I came to the Hangang River Festival to ride in a canoe. I might fall in the water, but it still seems fun.
This canoe ride takes visitors to the most scenic views on the river. Canoers can also get sprinkled by water underneath the river's rainbow fountain.
It was so nice and cool getting sprayed by water. Usually, we have to go to distant vacation spots to ride a canoe, but it's so nice that we can ride it here on the nearby Hangang River.
This program and the Hangang River Festival remind people of the Hangang's beauty and the importance of this waterway. People are loving it.
According to officials, this tour was so popular it was fully booked only a few minutes after reservations opened. But paddling in a canoe isn't the only fun activity planned. The Hangang River Festival kicked off last Friday, and there are fun programs planned in all 11 parks that run along the river. And events will continue until August 15th, with fun movie nights, concerts, and classes for bike rides and water safety.
This Hangang River Festival is planned for all 4 seasons: spring, summer, fall and winter. And this year's summer festival has over 20 programs in 4 themes: water sports, exhibitions, challenges and experiences.
And for those who missed this summer's fun at the river, there's no reason to fret. Seoul City officials, for the first time this year, are planning to host a festival for every season, with events in line with a seasonal theme. So the festival fun will return in time for the fall leaves. Kim Yeon-seung, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In Russia, a US women's basketball player has been sentenced to prison. WNBA star Brittany Griner has been sentenced to 9 years behind bars. She was sentenced in a Russian court on Thursday after being convicted on drug possession and smuggling charges. Griner was also fined roughly $16,000. The 31-year-old was arrested in February at Moscow's Sheremetyevo airport after police found vape canisters containing cannabis oil in her luggage. The case comes amid political tensions between Moscow and Washington over the Ukraine war, and pundits believe Griner could be returned to the US in a high-profile prisoner exchange. The White House has urged Russia to accept a, quote, substantial offer made for the release of Griner and ex-Marine Paul Whelan, also in Russian prison. Global oil prices dropped on Thursday to their lowest levels since the start of the war in Ukraine. The drop comes amid worries that a possible economic recession could hit energy demand. Benchmark Brent crude futures fell by 2.75% to $94.12, the lowest since February 18th. Meanwhile, West Texas Intermediate futures were at the lowest level since February 2nd at $88.54, dropping 2.12%. The drop is a relief for heavy oil consumers as prices had broken the $120 mark earlier in the year. In Germany, firefighters have been battling a fire at an ammunition dump on the outskirts of Berlin since Thursday. Approximately 100 firefighters at the scene have been hampered by a series of blasts from the facility used to store unexploded World War II bombs and other explosives in a forested area southwest of the city. Scheduled detonations at the site were regularly conducted but were stopped due to drought-like conditions in the area. This has led to a build-up of inventory at the site. So far, the blaze has spread across 15,000 square meters, putting pressure on emergency services due to a surge of forest fires across the country. Officials say the cause of the fire is still unknown. Some good news for Australia's Great Barrier Reef, where the highest recorded amount of coral cover in 36 years has been seen. This is according to a coral survey by the Australian Institute of Marine Science published Thursday. The report found that between August 2021 and May 2022, 87 reefs showed an increase of hard coral cover. In the northern area of the site, average hard coral cover rose to 36% in 2022, up from a low of 13% in 2017. The central region, meanwhile, saw hard coral cover grow to 33% from a low of 12% in 2019. However, noting coral cover loss in southern sections of the reef, experts warned that the site is still vulnerable to heat waves and predators. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good Friday afternoon. Extreme heat is plaguing the whole country, and it's even hotter than yesterday, reaching 32 in Seoul and 37 in Daegu. Well, feels like temperatures are higher than the actual temperatures due to the high humidity. Please wear cool and loose-fitting clothes if you're going outside and stay hydrated. Well, to add insult to injury, we also have scatter showers in store. They could be followed by stormy conditions with up to 60 millimeters in southern regions, including Chungcheongdo province. So always bring your umbrella and stay safe if you're out and about. Now, the most areas are under heat alerts as they are expanded and intensified, including Seoul. The skies are overcast, but the sun is breaking through the clouds. Strong sunshine brings a high UV index, so put on your sunscreen thoroughly. And the same pattern will continue over the weekend, a scorcher with scatter showers. More rain in central parts in the forecast, so always stay weather aware. Have a great weekend, and let's take a look at the worldwide weather conditions.
And that ends this week's editions of the Daily Report. Have a good and safe weekend. See you next Monday.
We've had 13 episodes so far. And today marks the grand finale. Last dish, but definitely not the least. That's right, it is kimchi. I dedicate this to all those who think making kimchi is too hard. Get fish sauce, sea salt, lots of chili powder. Halve a napa cabbage and just chop. Use sea salt and water to grind the cabbage. Then slice radish very thin. Scallions too. Now for kimchi, we need starch glue. Pour flour in water, and this glue makes the fermentation bacteria grow way faster. Pair for a hint of sweetness. Now it's time. Blend everything. See if your cabbage has gotten softer. Wash it thoroughly to get rid of excess salt. Because it's time to mix everything together. Get your jars ready. Shall we have a taste? I, just like any other Korean, like to eat my fresh kimchi with boiled pork belly, suyu. Now, my job is done. Goodbye, everyone. Chef Yuan.
너를 보지 않으면 나 집으로 절대 못 내려가 공공감 리사이 적고 났어 나의 피로 대한 독립 어제 오늘 난 그날을 위한 기도 이 땅의 해방을 향한 하얼빈 앞에 내 방아쇠 이건 나의 민족과 조국을 위한 충성이야 코리아 오라 코리아 오라 만세 우리가 하나가 되는 순간 만세 밝은 내일을 향해 오늘도 만세 난 자유로이 춤을 춰 만세 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 우리가 하나가 되는 순간 만세 밝은 내일을 향해 오늘도 만세 난 자유로이 춤을 춰 만세 만세
넘어서야 할 것들 망설임, 무례함, 불의, 편견, 타협, 차별, 부정 그리고 내 자신 태권도로 나는 나를 이겨낼 것이다. 나를 넘어서는 위대한 도전 태권도
가수의 어떤 그 꿈이 계속 살아있었기 때문에 제가 그 꿈을 어떻게 다른 걸 하면서 저버릴 수가 도저히 없더라고요. 그래서 노래에 매진하게 됐고요. 노래를 함으로써 행복함이 저한테 전해지니까 건강도 많이 좋아졌고 그래서 노래는 제 인생입니다. 코로나 때 그 무대 없는 그 슬픔은 이루 말할 수가 없었고 정말 다시 무대에 서는 그게 가수한테는 최고의 삶이자 인생의 어떤 정말 희열이고 즐거움 아닐까 그렇게 생각이 듭니다. 화이팅! 옷도 새 거로 구입했고 또 브로치도 이쁜 거 달고 비대면 하다가 이렇게 대면하게 된다는 그 콘서트 때문에 설레서 잠도 못 잤고 무대는 뭐 최선 다해서 열심히 노래 좋게 아주 이쁘게 들려드리도록 하겠습니다.
별빛에 어리는 눈물방울 나를 두고 떠난 그 사람 헤어진다 생각 못한 내가 바보인가요 사무치도록 그리운 사람 스치는 바람에 기대면 어디선가 들리는 너의 목소리 저 부는 바람이 다 지우고 갈까 잊으려 애를 써봐도 이렇게 바보처럼 잊지 못하네 가슴 아픈 사랑아 사랑한 사랑아 그리움에 눈물 떨구네 별빛에 어리는 눈물방울 나를 두고 떠난 그 사람 헤어진다 생각 못한 내가 바보인가요 사무치도록 그리운 사람 스치는 바람에 기대면 어디선가 들리는 너의 목소리 저 부는 바람이 다 지우고 갈까 잊으려 애를 써봐도 이렇게 바보처럼 잊지 못하네 가슴 아픈 사랑아 사랑한 사랑아 그리움에 눈물 떨구네 가슴 아픈 사랑아 사랑한 사랑아 그리움에 눈물 떨구네
제가 중국에서의 삶이 되게 평탄했었는데 그 평탄함에서 소중함과 감사함을 몰랐어요. 내가 잘해서 잘 됐나 보다라고 했는데 제가 한국 생활을 하면서 한국에서 또 가수 활동을 하면서 이렇게나 노래 잘하는 가수들이 많았구나라는 생각이 들고 또 이렇게나 열심히 하는 사람들이 많았고 작은 무대가 저한테 주어졌을 때 정말 어렵게 왔다라는 걸 그때 이제 알기 시작을 하면서 어떤 일에도 사소한 일에도 감사함을 알게 됐고 그 무대가 소중하다는 걸 깨달았어요.
트롯 대신에 진가를 제대로 보여주시는 중년 헬스타 최연아 가수님을 응원합니다.
그 무명 가수가 길어지다 보니까 최연아는 안 되나 보다, 노래가 너무 못하나 보다라고 이렇게 생각을 했었는데 모든 팬분들이 우리 최연아는 최고야, 우리 엘사님 최고, 늘 진심을 다해서 저한테 이제 얘기를 해주실 때마다 이제 내가 조금 자신감을 가져도 되는구나. 그럼으로 인해서 더 감사해야 하고 더 음악에 대한 열정을 더 키워도 되는구나라는 그 계기를 주셨기 때문에 너무 감사한 분들이죠, 저한테는.
젖줄이 까강강강 슬피 울면 가시님은 소식 없고 찬바람만 몰아치네 청춘 다 늙는다. 울지 마라 검은 고야 네가 울면 나도 운다. 서리 맺힌 사연 이 심정을 누가 아니. 간장 다 녹는다. 내 가슴 애끓는 가슴 검은 고 울어 울어 한숨으로 지새는 밤 청춘 다 늙는다. 감사합니다.
안녕하세요. 정답입니다. 반갑습니다. 특별한 걸 제가 가지고 왔는데요. 하트를 들고 왔습니다. 이런 거 괜찮아요? 하트를 들고 왔습니다. 연습생 한번 해보는 건 어떻겠냐라는 제안이 들어왔는데 저는 그게 발라드 가수 제안인 줄 알았는데 트로트 가수더라고요. 가보니까. 그래서 그 뒤로부터 트로트에 관심이 가지게 되었어요. 다행히도 제가 이제 전공이 한국무용이었어가지고 그 한국무용이 어렸을 때부터 국악이나 그런 한에 대해서 많이 배우고 또 그렇게 표현을 해야 된다는 거를 알고 있는데 그게 좀 익숙해져서 그런지 트로트에서도 그 한이 느껴지잖아요. 그래서 그 한을 좀 풀 수 있는 키가 저한테는 가지고 있지 않았나라는 생각이 들습니다. 저한테 무대랑 이제 밥 같은 존재라고 할 수 있는데 여기에 안 서면 힘도 안 나고 또 관객분들과 팬분들의 박수와 함성 소리를 듣게 되면은 삶의 활력소가 되는 것 같고 그게 없으면 좀 힘들 것 같아요.
그땐 사랑 같은 거 가라 그래 다 잊어 접어들 거면 처음부터 주지나 말지 이토록 깃털보다 가벼운 그런 게 사랑이 모든 게 다 거짓말 어떻게 내게 가라 그래 그땐 사랑 같은 거 가라 그래 다 잊어볼 테니까 울기는 싫어 까지 끌어라 그래 차라리 가라 그래 이렇게 힘들게 할 거면 처음부터 오지도 말지 가슴이 뚫린 듯이 아파와 이런 게 이별이니 허가밖에는 모르는 날 어떻게 울려 가라 그래 그땐 사랑 같은 거 가라 그래 다 잊어줄 테니까 울기는 싫어 까지 끌어라 그래 차라리 가라 그래 그런 사랑이라면 가라 그래 더는 미련 없다고 속지 않을래 까지 끌어라 그래 한양이 가라
그래 2012년도에 데뷔를 했었다가 13년도에 관두게 됐어요. 제가 생각해왔던 꿈과 너무 달라가지고 그리고 한 7년 정도 뭐 전공도 살려서 리조트에 취직했다가 회사도 갔다가 어머니랑 주먹밥집도 했다가 그런 와중에 송가인 누나가 남자 버전 경연이 하면 지원해봐라 이래가지고 마지막으로 한번 도전해봐야겠다 해서 이제 어머니랑 주먹밥집 가게 끝나면 가게에서 연습하고 하면서 도전하게 되면서 지금 이렇게 라이브 온 무대에 서게 됐죠. 저도 이제 꿈을 꿨었고 꿈을 이뤘었고 포기도 했지만 예전에 그런 말을 들었어요. 한 번 가수는 영원한 가수다. 계속 이 꿈을 간직하고 언제든 펼칠 각오를 하고 있으면 언제든 다시 꿈을 펼칠 수 있는 날이 오는 것 같아요. 저는 약간 민트색? 저희 팬클럽 색깔입니다. 이제 민트색이 되게 밝아요. 그래서 사람들한테 항상 밝은 에너지를 좀 많이 선사해드리고 싶어요. 저로 인해서 좀 힐링해줬으면 좋겠고.
울려라 북을 울려라